So this afternoon we're very lucky to have Frank Ortner, who's the Consul General of the Austrian Embassy in London, is going to speak to us. Frank just happened to mention, we were discussing while you were coming into the waiting room, that we actually have a group of 10 third and fourth generation AJR members going to Vienna this Sunday on a 5-day heritage tour, which has been highly subsidized by the Jewish Welcome Service in Vienna. And this is the second such trip that we have run. I accompanied a group of second generation myself in 2022. It was an excellent trip. And Frank has just informed me that all new citizens, Austrian citizens, get free entry to the Jewish Museum in Vienna. And that's on the itinerary of the trip. I've been a couple of times now and it's very well worth seeing. But, you know, so if it wasn't enough reason to get your Austrian citizenship and passport, now you have another reason to want to do it. So I am going to hand over to Frank now, who is going to run through the eligibility, the process, the documentation, etc. And then we have some questions that have been submitted in advance, which I will ask Frank on your behalf. Over to you, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the citizenship for descendants of refugees or persecuted persons in the mainly the Nazi period, but also before. So actually we are speaking about persecuted persons in the time between 1933 and 45, which brings me to the eligibility of our, I would call it enhanced or recently, I would say, ameliorated citizenship inquiry that was anonymously decided upon by the Austrian Parliament. So all Austrian parties that are represented in the Parliament are in favor of this law that made it much more easy for descendants of refugees to become Austrian. This new citizenship law came into force on the 1st of September 2020, so more than 4 years ago. And it was a coincidence that it happened shortly before Brexit became effective. It was after the Brexit, but it became effective, as you know, at the end of 2020. So the interest in the United Kingdom for the inquiry of the Austrian citizenship was especially high, or still is. I would say one of the reasons is Brexit, because people living in the United Kingdom were enjoying all the liberties of citizens of EU member states, and it makes travel easier, it makes works abroad easier, and so on. So there are many practicalities that are connected with the Austrian citizenship. But I noticed that many of the new Austrians, as we like to call them, or Wiederösterreicher, re-Austrians, we call them also are having a very, very close connection to Austria. It might be through their parents, their grandparents, the cultural. In many talks, I learned that the cultural aspect is held up within the families, but many of the new Austrians also have relatives in Austria or went to Austria many times on holidays. But yes, that is on a general note. For you might be mainly interested on the whole process and the eligibility, on the documentation, so the practicalities, which I'm happy to talk about. The eligibility, it is quite easy, but I can see that Dan Strauss is also in the audience. Hello, Dan. And that is a very complicated case, which we hope that we can finish soon in December. Actually, but we can talk about this separately then, yeah, perhaps in the future. But in a few words, the eligibility is anybody who was Austrian or had the citizenship of one of the successor states of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That is a citizen of back then Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, and Poland. With the Soviet Union is not so clear. There are some uncertainties. But any citizen of these countries, and Austria, of course, who left Austria between 1933 and 1955 due to persecution, is eligible, and his descendants are also eligible for the acquiry or reacquiry of the Austrian citizenship, and in a facilitated manner, I would like to call it. It was possible in certain cases to acquire the Austrian citizenship before this amendment to the law was made, but it was much more bureaucratic and complicated. And this amendment opened up also the citizenship to many, many more people, those who have female ancestors, for instance. They were usually not able before this amendment to become Austrian. So anybody, so please.
Choosing a chime, you have to hear it.
The question. So this was not a question. Okay. So please remember, anybody who was Austrian, Czech, Polish, Yugoslavian, Hungarian, Romanian, in certain cases also Soviet, from the Soviet Union, who left what is now, that is important, I forgot to state, who left the territory of what is now the Republic of Austria in present day. So if you look at the map, this ancestor should have left what is now the territory of the Republic of Austria between 1933 and 1955 due to persecution, is eligible, and so are all direct descendants, children, grandchildren, adoptive children. They are all eligible. Why 1955? This is a special date, and it is also a novelty, because in 1945 Austria became a democratic and a democratic republic again, and but many refugees came back shortly after the war and tried to build up a life again, but then noticed that it was not so easy. Austria was heavily distracted through the war, and perhaps the population, Austrian population, was might have been also hostile to those refugees who came back after the war. So, so it was opened up until 1955. So a rather generous generous time frame, I would call it, that is foreseen in the. It's not directly written in the law, but this is how it is done in reality. It is 1933 till 1955. The practicalities, how will you become Austrian? It is actually quite straightforward in most of the cases. There's an online questionnaire. You can find it on our website alongside a lot of information from the Austrian embassy about the citizenship for the descendants of refugees. An online questionnaire. You should fill it out as thoroughly as you can. When you finish this online questionnaire, a declaration is automatically generated. You should print it out, sign it, and either come to us, to the embassy, and hand over the declaration together with the documents, original documents, or you can send this via post to us at the embassy. In most of the cases, people would like to come to us, to the embassy, in order that the original documents are not being lost in the post. If you come to us in person, we will check the documents, make copies, or perhaps it's more fast forward if you bring the copies yourself. We check if the original and the copies are the same, actually, or we make copies ourselves, hand back the original documents, and then send it onwards to Vienna, where the decision making is done. And not only the decision making, in many cases, when you don't have any documentation about your persecuted ancestors, there are 30 historians hired by the city of Vienna who would comb through the archives and try to find documentation about your ancestors, so that you don't have to prove yourself that your ancestor was persecuted. In many cases, such documents are no longer there with the children, grandchildren, or in third generations. So in many cases, this was also successful, that in the archives in Vienna, they are quite well kept, and it's quite easy to find if an ancestor was persecuted, especially if the ancestor was Jewish, I would say, because with political refugees, they were often working clandestinely, and so there will not be much to find in the archives. But with Jewish refugees, it should be rather straightforward, even if you don't hold any documentation from your parents, grandparents, or grandparents. It usually takes 6 months, the decision making. Now it's even less, I noticed, which makes it much faster than the German program, I'm proud to say. And German colleagues tell me it takes 2 years usually until a decision is being done. And we then get Bescheid, which is a notification that usually the procedure ends positive. So in more than 95% the procedure ended positive from all the declarations that were filed. We will send out these notifications via post. When you receive it, you just need to make 2 more signatures, and from that moment on, you can apply for a passport here at the embassy also. So the procedure, we had very good repercussions, should be rather straightforward, and now it is also easy to make an appointment. In the beginning, we had a backlog due to COVID. There were waiting times of up to 4 months, but now there's no waiting time whatsoever, or it's always less than 1 week. Let's say that. No? Also for the passports, there are no waiting times whatsoever. Usually you can have a passport appointment on the very same day. For the documentation that we need is the following. First of all, your birth certificate with an apostille, which is a form of legalization that is being done in the FCDO. So the process here with us is completely cost-free, but the apostille for your birth certificate and also for the criminal record are needed. These are 2 legalizations, and this is something you would have to pay yourself. So it's your birth certificate and the criminal record, both with apostille. Then we need a passport photo, your passport or copy of the passport, of course, all documents, as I told before, in copies with us, you will get back the original right away. If you send it in via post, we will make the copies here and send back the originals. But of course, this is a risk that they are being lost by the post. Then we would need, if the persecuted ancestor is not your parent, but your grandparent, it would be very helpful if we would get also the birth certificate of the parent who is connecting you with the persecuted grandparent. So the descendancy is being proven, so to say. I think you will understand. The birth certificate of the parent is not needed to be legalized. So it is only your birth certificate and the criminal record. Also, your parent does not need a criminal record. Or your grandparent, if you are 3rd generation. And if you have documents about the persecuted ancestor that could prove that he was persecuted, there are many, visas from the passport. We often see visas from the passport and the passports of ancestors where it is marked that they were Jewish, that passports issued by the Third Reich. Any documents that might give us or the colleagues in Vienna who decide upon these declarations would make the work easier to find out if the ancestor was persecuted indeed or not. They should be handed in also. if there are no such documents, as I told you before, there are historians who will try to find it in the archives, but this, as you may understand, will perhaps lengthen the process of the acquiry of the citizenship. So it would be in your own interest to bring along as many documents that you have from your ancestors, and the story where they lived in Vienna is always it's usually Vienna or outside Vienna in Austria. To have a proof that this person fled from Austria, what is now the Republic of Austria, anything that may help in the process. So that is basically it. I'm just thinking if I've forgotten anything, I'm not sure. Yes, in general, I just want to mention we have quite a number here in London. We are approaching, I just read out the numbers, so far 4,633 declarations resulted positively and only 191 negatively. So it is the biggest part is resulted positively. And we have received declarations for 5,432 persons up until yesterday evening. That are very current numbers, which brings us on the second place after the Austrian embassy in Tel Aviv, and it's a much larger number than in our general consulate in New York. Which was surprising for many. But I think Brexit is responsible for this very high uptake here in the United Kingdom of this scheme, as you might call it.
Do you think the Sachertorte has got something to do with it as well?
Sorry,
the Sachertorte has got something to do with it as well.
Well,
I mean, the descendants that I meet, the Austrians are always very passionate about Vienna, right? In comparison to the Germans, I would say there seems to be a bigger connection.
Well, it might be. I mean, due to my profession, you might say I've lived in many countries, and I have to say that the cakes in Austria are the best. So you might be right.
Good.
Lovely. It's a good reason to become Austrian, really.
Yeah, exactly. Another reason.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So let me go through these questions, but actually the first one you've already covered. So it was about somebody who was put off by the prospect of sending old fragile documents and the risk of them getting lost in the post. So do people need to make an appointment to bring their documents in and get them copied?
Yes, you can make an online appointment on our website. It's fairly easy. And as I said before, you will find plenty of appointments. So there's no long waiting time for an appointment. But yes, we don't have the walk-in service.
Okay. Is there an Austrian embassy in Scotland that the Scottish people need to go to?
No, we are having we are having a honorary consulate, but by law, the honorary consul is not allowed to accept these declarations. But if somebody is listening at the moment from Scotland, I will be there on the 5th and on the 6th of December And on those 2 days, you are very welcome to hand in your documents. But please call our honorary consul, Christoph Greppertz. We already have one such appointment in Edinburgh on the 5th of December.
Okay, great. Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if you covered this. What is the most efficient way for my sister to provide you with the information you need for her to reclaim her citizenship when I and her other sister have already reclaimed our Austrian citizenship?
Well, she should just refer to the case of the sister whose case already resulted positively with case number, and then actually it is sufficient to bring their own birth certificate, the passport, the photo, and the criminal record, and then it should be very, very easy. So that makes it easy for the whole family. We always recommend that the whole family should do this together in one, but that is not being made very often. And we can see that usually one member of the family starts the process, and then word spreads that it resulted positively, and actually it's not such a hard task to do. And then one by one, more family members come, and it's not unusual that some family members make the declaration much later. But it is very easy for the colleagues in Vienna if they have a reference case in the family, so they do not need to come through the archives a second time, for instance.
Thank you. So there's a question here, someone who said that their father, who was born in Austria, his birth certificate was lost in the post in the 1960s.
Yeah.
But they have other proof, like his pension details, etc. But presumably one of your 30 historians could help to find a copy.
Yeah, and yes, first of all that, then it could be found by a historian, but the other, I mean, I understand in this case the persecuted ancestor is the father himself. If he receives, receives or received a pension, there's a special pension scheme for those who had to leave Austria due to persecution. Even if they left Austria very young, then they had the chance to pay in a very small amount into the insurance, and would get a full state pension from Austria, which is a very, very well received and a very generous offer, actually, from the Austrian pension insurance. In that case, everything has been checked by the pension insurance already, and because only persecuted persons are allowed to receive such a pension. And I would recommend that the descendant should just refer to this pension that the father received, and the rest should be very straightforward and easy.
Okay, great. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Last question here. What is the legal position as regards residence in Austria of the spouse of someone who has been granted Austrian citizenship as the descendant of somebody who is persecuted, but the spouse is not a citizen? So they're asking about residency for non-citizens. is the position of the spouse affected by a move of the citizen with the spouse to reside in another European country, for example, Germany?
Well, in fact, it is much more easy to reside in another European country, but the one whose nationality the spouse has. It always applies for the residency in the country of the spouse. The national law would apply, which means the spouse of an Austrian would have to prove to have a basic knowledge of German before settling in Austria and sufficient income beforehand, before moving to Austria.
Right.
Whereas the spouse of an Austrian can move to any other country of the EU due to the EU-Freizügigkeitsregel, it is called. So is to the liberty of movement or freedom of movement. So a spouse of an Austrian can move freely together with the Austrian spouse in any other country, but in Austria, the national rules apply. And there are two minor obstacles, I would call it. They are feasible, but still there are obstacles that do not exist in other countries. It's the very basic knowledge of German, and it's A1, so it should be feasible within 2 or 3 months language course, I think. And B is the proof of sufficient income by the spouse alone, by the Austrian alone. So the Austrian spouse should have enough income in Austria before the non-Austrian spouse can move to Austria. Those are two obstacles. But in any other country, it is not a problem to move there. And I would like to add, because not many people know, that if you travel together with your Austrian spouse to any country in the European Union, I would recommend to take the marriage certificate with you. And first of all, in that case, you are allowed to queue with the EU citizens, so to say, and not having to queue in the non-European citizen line. And B, you shouldn't get a stamp in your passport in that case, and you can stay more than 90 days within 180 days in that case. But you need to travel together with your spouse, and you have to prove that you are married.
So you're talking about the queue in the airport at the passport control?
Usually the queue at the EU counter, so to say, is much shorter than compared to the non-EU counter.
Even when you're coming into the UK, that's the case, I think.
Yes.
Quite often, yeah. That's a very good reason.
The British are more generous as the Europeans are, no? Because we, EU, we can queue in the same queue. But when coming back, I would recommend to take your British passport with you anyway, because because as a EU citizen, you are allowed to stay here for half a year, but not longer. And there might be some hiccups with the data. So, well, it is feasible to do to go back and forth just with the Austrian passport. But if you're a double citizen, I would recommend to take both passports, and re-entering into the UK is best being done with a British passport. Yeah.
And just to clarify that you can hold both passports. You don't.
Yes. Well, this is not a problem. You don't have to give up your British citizenship. Surely we wouldn't have 5,000 new Austrians if it were the case. I think then it would be only 5 at the most, not 5,000. And a very
You are
frequent.
being recorded, Frank. Be careful what you say.
Yeah. Well, no, it is the plain truth. It is just a guess. No, by people who live here in the United Kingdom wouldn't. I fully understand they wouldn't give up the British citizenship for becoming Austrian. That would be. But then this whole scheme wouldn't have been successful at all. And another question that we hear many times: what about taxes? It is not a problem tax-wise. So if you become Austrian, you don't have to pay taxes as long as you don't live in Austria and work there or gaining income in Austria. If you rent out a flat in Austria, you would need to pay taxes, or if you work in Austria, you need to pay taxes. But as long as you stay in the United Kingdom and continue working here, there's no problem whatsoever with Austrian taxes.
Okay. I just want to add also that because you spoke about the stipulation of having a basic knowledge of German, that we are looking, the HAR is looking to provide some sort of German language course for our members, for the new citizens or those
that is
in
very
the process, because that's something that a lot of people have asked about. So they ask and we provide. What can I say? Great, that's lovely, Frank. I think we've covered everything, and I want to thank you very much for your time and for everybody for coming.
Well, with pleasure. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you to you and the HAR and to the audience for the patience.